Hi guys, thanks Mo, as we call him, for the introduction. I'm pretty excited to be here. I wanted to start out with a little intro on me, even though I got a nice one there from Mo. This is my family. This is a photo of my family, my husband Dan Harlicker, and my beautiful daughter Lily, and my son Lennox. I am a photographer locally here in Portland, Oregon, and own Bliss Studio. I specialize in little kids and shooting families. I've been a photographer for just shy of about 20 years. But over the years, I've done a lot of different things. Just so you guys know, I have shot weddings. I have shot some high school seniors, but I definitely narrowed my field down to kids and families, which is where I seem to excel the best. Today, I'm pretty inspired by a recent trip that I took to the coast. It was just a couple weeks ago, where I had 8 family sessions, family and kid sessions at the beach. We rented a house and spent the entire day shooting. I'm hoping that I can kind of share some of the tips from that today, as well as what I did about the sky. Skies are a little bit rough in Oregon, especially on the beach. You're getting a lot of haze. Sometimes you'll get blue sky, but typically it's a little difficult. So I'll share a little bit about that today as well. I want to do a little bit of background stuff as well. I want to be able to show the tutorials through the software and what I do, but I'd like to share some tips on how I approach things, maybe a little bit on posing if I can, and hopefully give you guys a little bit of the behind the scenes information as well. This is a collection of a couple of the favorites that I've pulled out of the event that I was at, so that you guys can kind of see where we're at.
Awesome.
So as we're going, one of the things that I really like about webinars being live is that you guys can pipe in. So I'm hoping that we can do questions along the way. I know we'll do some at the end as well, but if you guys have questions, please, Mo, can I give information?
There's a questions pane on your control panel there on the right side of the GoToWebinar control panel. Just use that to answer or to ask questions, and I'll answer them here, pass anything up to Whitney that I can't answer. If you need her to go over something again, just shoot us a note in that questions box. And this entire webinar is being recorded, so if you miss something or if you have to tune out for a little bit, we will be recording it and we'll send it all out to you guys.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. So if you can see over here on the left, I have a folder of my beach event, and I have all of the clients that I photographed over the day, all separated by their last name. The first thing that I want to do is after a shoot, I'm going to come back and I'm going to download them all, put them all in their folders, and then I'm going to work on editing and culling. So one thing that I hear very often from other photographers is that they spend so much time trying to go through images. I can tell you, as we go through these, I've narrowed them a little bit, but typically on a regular session, I would probably shoot anywhere from 400 to 600 probably, to be safe, photographs. I know that may seem like a lot, but you also have to realize that I photograph kids who are not always the most cooperative subject. If you're shooting high school seniors, it's probably not as bad, but with little kids, they're running from you, they're, doing their crazy stuff. So it's imperative that you take the shots that you need to be able to get back and get your solid set that you're going to give to your client. I don't give my client that many photos. I give them somewhere between 50 and 80. So how do we go from 600 files down to 50 or 80? The best way that I have learned to edit through my stuff is to go through and select my favorites rather than trying to delete the bad ones. So if you pull up your images and you start going through them in detail view, as soon as I see one that I like, I go ahead and 5-star it to keep. And I just keep going through. I actually need to change my sort here. So we're going to change this to file name so that they're in order. We're going to start up at the beginning. Open them up again, just flip through them. And as you see one that you like, you 5-star to keep. Okay. This is so much faster than trying to pull out the bad ones. So, I mean, you do the math. You have 600 images and you only want 50. Picking 50 good ones out of a set of 600 is going to be a lot faster.
And is there a hotkey that you use, Whitney, when you're starring images? And
so there's quite a few different ways that you can do this. I like the star system, so I'm going to hit a 5-star. You can see the stars down here in the bottom. Every time I click one, it's going to highlight those. There's also
And you're hitting the 5 key?
Yeah, the 5, sorry, the 5 for 5-star. 4 if you're doing 4-star, 3 for 3-star, depending on how you want to do that. There's also the colors, if you prefer to do a colors, and you can see the numbers beside it. You can also do a like and a dislike. I picked the 5-star. I'm not sure why I chose that. It doesn't really matter how you want to cull through them, but pick the thing that works the easiest for you. In the past, I used to 5-star my favorites and 1-star my unfavorites, and that was taking too long. So now I just literally go through 5-star everything that I'm going to keep, and then I get rid of all of the ones that have no star system on them. So this is pretty quick. So once I've gone through and culled my images, okay, I will be perfectly honest with our system. I can get through culling in probably about 15-20 minutes, maybe quicker, depends on the job. If I have a family like you're seeing here, there's a lot of eyes that I'm worried about, so I am going to go a little bit slower through these. You can also see as I shot, I overshot, so there's quite a few here. This is partly protecting myself so that I don't have to do head swaps later. So when I have this many kids and this many faces, I'm going to take quite a few extra photos to make sure that I get it. So as I'm running through them, all I'm doing is looking for the eyes open, looking for a shot that's mostly okay. If I grab a couple extras, I can go back through later. So let me do that really quick. I'm going to change my sort to rating, and I'm going to go to my 5 stars that I just did, and I can pull them up in the new compare mode, and I can look at them and get my one that I want to keep quickly through this. Still doing okay over there, Mo?
Yeah, doing great. Keep going.
Okay, so once I've got through and culled through my images, the next thing that I like to do is select a favorite photo. So I like the instant gratification. I love to be excited about what I shot. When I do an event like this and I have 7 or 8 jobs that I'm shooting in a day, it's a little bit overwhelming. I have so many photos to go through, so many pictures, but there's usually 1 or 2 that really stand out that I remember from photographing on that day. This could be something that I looked at the back of the camera. This could be something that I happened to scan through when I got back and downloaded them, but I'm going to want to pull out those 1 or 2 favorites and spend a little extra time editing those, which will help inspire me for how I edit the rest of the job. So I kind of want to, let's start there so I can give you guys a little tutorial on how I edit an image, and then we'll kind of switch back between getting some behind the scenes so that you guys will have a little bit of both.
So there's a few questions, Whitney, before you jump on. A lot of people are asking, why are you shooting JPEG over RAW? Answer that one.
That's that's a scary question, and I don't know if there's probably a right answer to that. Honestly, I think that shooting RAW versus JPEG is a complete personal preference, and I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer. And I know that there's many people that would argue with me on that. However, I think that if you shoot a different camera type, such as Nikon or Canon, or I mean, it's all personal preference. I shoot JPEGs. I shoot a lot of photos in a job, so it's quick. I'm not as concerned about making adjustments to RAW files. I work great with JPEGs. I have no problems with them. The output is really where the bigger thing is for me. I'm getting the prints and the desired output from what I am shooting, and my clients are happy, I'm happy, so it works. I don't think like I said, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, so I don't want anybody to crucify me for that, but if you shoot RAW, great. If you didn't actually see my little thing up here that says JPEG, you probably wouldn't know, but it's totally personal preference.
And from there too, I'm seeing a lot of questions asking about how, when you're culling your images, do you cull them directly from the card? Do you put them on an external hard drive? Do you put only the 5 stars on the hard drive to cull through?
Okay.
What's your process?
Whew, that is a really good question. Please do not edit from a compact flash card or anything like that. I take all of my files and I download them straight to my hard drive or my external hard drive where I store all of my clients' files, and I work from those. Okay, so you don't want to have any problems. You want to make sure that you've got them downloaded over, you have your originals, and then you can go through and edit them. I will tell you that I delete my 1 stars, or my no stars, I guess I should say, completely. I get rid of them. So once I've kept my favorites, there's no need to keep the other ones. I completely delete them. I'm not going to show them to my client. I'm not going to pull out bad ones that I don't like. I'm only going to show those favorite shots. So I will pull those off my hard drive. I encourage you to make sure that you back up. I do back up on CDs. I know that's going to be obsolete at some point. I have another external hard drive where I also back stuff up. So make sure that you have your original files backed up in a different location. Got any more before I keep going?
That's all good. Keep going.
Am I going too fast for you guys, or everybody okay?
Looks like it's good.
All right, I talk fast, so I'm gonna try to get as much information as I can in here for you guys. So I'm opening this picture. So this is a shot. This little girl's name is Ellery. That really stood out to me the day that I was photographing. I was super excited. I knew that this white dress she had on was going to look beautiful in a walking away shot. I happened to see it on the back of my camera. It was the first photo that I knew I wanted to work on. So with that, I wanted to kind of be inspired for how I was going to edit through or add my finishes, I guess I should say, to the rest of my images from this job. So I'm going to take Ellery in. And a couple of things that I could think about with this is I would like to warm it up a little bit. So I love that kind of in this little seagrass, it's got a nice little warm temperature in here. I do want to complement that a little bit. And then as you can see above, we've got this completely blown out sky, which kills the shot for me. It was completely hazed over. It was later in the day, but I want to go ahead and add that sky in so that we can pop this a little bit more. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add a color enhancer filter so that we can warm this up just a little bit. I'm going to take my temperature slider and I'm going to warm us up maybe about a 30-ish, 35. So you can see we've got a little bit more warmth in her skin. I'm going to do a before and after on that. So you can kind of see that she's got a little bit of a gray skin tone in here. So as soon as I add that warmth in here, we've got a little bit in here. As a portrait photographer, I typically like my skin tones a little more warm or a little bit more red. You don't want dead skin, you don't want that gray color, especially when you're shooting kids. I mean, you want those flushed cheeks and you want to add a little bit of life into people. So I tend to go maybe a little extra on that in the skin tones on my clients. Okay, so let's go ahead and up that tint just a little bit. This is all personal preference. I'm just going to do a tiny bit of adjustments here and pull that saturation down just a touch. Okay, so here's our little before and after. Okay, let's keep going. I am going to add a texture. And this is the cool concrete that's going to come up, and it's going to put a little bit of texture within the seagrass. But I'm going to invert it. So you can see it's lightened everything up. I'm going to go ahead and hit the invert button so we can darken it a little bit. And then I'm going to pull that opacity down to about a 50%. So it's just adding a little extra texture in here, kind of warming it up a little bit. And then I'm going to add one more filter. We're going to add a vignette. So I'm going to pull that dark around the edges back in that seagrass. So we'll add a big softy and darken that up a little bit. Okay, so I have the bottom half of this photo about where I want. One thing I do see is I've got my texture on my subject here a little bit. So I'm going to go back to the textures and I'm going to turn on the mask and grab my little masking brush. And I'm going to do this very loose so we can get quickly through it for the webinar. But I'm going to mask that texture off of my subject's skin. I love using textures with portraits. I don't love necessarily having a texture on their faces or on their hair. So let's just pull that out. Okay, so I have the bottom half about where I'm happy. Let's go ahead and add the sky. So I'm going to head back up to the top. We're going to add a texture again. And then there's a new category that's called skies that I'm going to select. And then I want a more of a creamy, there's a whole bunch of skies you can pick in here, but a bunch of these I don't think are going to work as well. I want that creamy kind of rich to complement the seagrass. So I'm going to head down a little further to this sky, which is sky number 41. And I'm going to change the mode to darker. Okay, and then I'm going to pull this back a little bit. One thing that is kind of tricky about sky replacements is they can get fake really fast. So you see if the opacity is all the way up, this isn't very believable. So I tend to pull the opacity back quite a bit just to try to make it more of a believable sky replacement. Let's take that brightness, we're going to darken it up just a touch, and then I'm going to increase the saturation just a little bit. So now we're looking pretty good. Okay, let's pull that opacity down just a touch more, make it a little bit brighter. Okay, now if you're looking at it, you can see that the sky is the whole length of the photo. So we need to get that sky replacement off of the seagrass area. So while I'm on that texture, I'm gonna grab the masking bug and I'm gonna click on my image and I'm gonna change the preset. So you can see the mask up here says linear top. That needs to be linear bottom so that we flip it so that we're seeing the top of the sky, but now you can see that it's taken itself off of the seagrass. You're gonna take the large circle and you're gonna move it to your horizon. And then I'm gonna blend the sky a little bit better. So I'm gonna stretch this gradient out so that we can blend it and then move the sky up a little bit. Okay, so we have something like that. So let's look at the before and after on that. So just like I did with the texture where I took off a little bit on my subject, the same thing's gonna happen with this. So the horizon line isn't a nice straight line on this. I'm not as concerned about the seagrass. I think that the blending is fine, but I do wanna take the sky that's kind of over top of her head. So I would just take my masking brush and just real loosely brush right over her head. You wanna make this brush as small as you can and just take that sky right off of there, okay? So there is our before, and there's our after. So once I've gotten it to this point, I would go ahead and save this preset. I've already got it saved, so I'm not gonna go through and save it, but I would just go up to your settings and save settings as a preset, create a category. So I would create a new category if I was creating a preset for a group or a series session. So I would make this beach sessions and I would create a preset for this. Make sure that you have the effects settings on and also the gradient masks would be checked on because that's the mask that we added there for the sky and you're gonna need that for a future image. Once I've saved that preset, I now kind of have a look and a feel that I want to use for the rest of my beach sessions. Excuse me, I can't say sessions today. So I'm going to head back to browse. Got any questions for me?
No, looks like you're doing great. Everyone's saying they're loving your images, so keep it up, keep going.
Okay, so let's keep going. So I did say that I saved a preset. I have it actually already saved in here. And it's the seagrass one. So let's do one other thing with this. So once I have a preset saved, I would grab another image that is in that series. So let's actually take this one. Let me reset this one. Pull it into effects, and I'm going to grab that same preset that I just created for this image. Give it just a second here. I'm going to grab the seagrass and apply it. Okay, so all of my stuff is here in this preset. I actually have a couple extras in this one. This is a different preset, but it's pretty close. The main thing that you're going to need to do when you save a sky is you're going to need to go and make adjustments to that mask. So let's go in and grab that mask. You can see that the horizon line has changed, so it saves it in the middle. We're going to need to pull that up and blend that in a little bit. And then you're going to need to go in and mask your subject again on the same thing. So I would make this a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to quickly do this. If you guys zoom in and want to take a little bit more time on getting the mask. And then I'm going to turn off the texture on this one too. So this actually has a couple more things in it. So now I have an image that is very similar to the other one and still has a nice same look on it. Okay, I want to work on a different one. So the area that we shot had all of the seagrass and then leading up into the beach. So I was able to get quite a bit of variety in a very tight little area. This also meant that I had two different looks. I had the seagrass with the sky the way it was, and then I'm gonna have the beach. So I'm gonna grab a shot from the beach, which is gonna give us a totally different look. Hang on 1 second, I got it pulled. We are gonna work on this file. So let me reset this so we can see this one from the beginning. So once I headed down to the beach, you can see we still have this lovely haze down here. Very cool, not a whole lot going on. I don't like the skin tones. You can see that they're a little cooler in the skin tones, a little more gray. I definitely want to richen that up. I would love to put a sky in this, and then you can see they have a reflection down here. So what I also want to show you guys how to do is to add the reflection of the sky in the sand to match their reflections. So this was another shot that was one of my favorites. It also is gonna help with further editing once I get kind of my beach look and what I wanna do on the beach. You still okay? I'm gonna go into this one.
Yeah, no, we're doing good. I know for me personally that on the Oregon coast, this is one of the problems I struggle with, just having gray, blown out backgrounds where there's not much really to work with. So this is great.
This is pretty normal.
Yeah,
so
this is typical Oregon coast beach shoot for me, at least.
If you're somewhere else in the country and you guys have beautiful beaches, I'm jealous. But we're gonna fake it here and make this work. You do every once in a while get a nice day on the beach, but typically not. It's usually wind, cold, and haze that we're fighting. And I will do a little bit more behind the scenes, but let's work on one more file and then we can go through some behind the scenes tips for you guys so that you're still keeping up here. Okay, so for this file, I definitely want to warm it up, which we will do along the ways. Let's first add the tone enhancer. And it's a little bit bright, so I'm going to pull the exposure slider down just a little bit. And I'm going to bring the highlights back in just a little bit as well. So let's pull this down. And I'm going to increase the shadows. We're increasing a little bit of the highlights and the shadows here. And then let's pull down on the whites. Okay. And then I'm going to add a dynamic contrast so we can get a nice little sharp pop here. Let's get a little bit more of the small details. And then to warm it up, I'm going to add a sunshine filter. And we're going to increase the warmth so we don't have those dead skin tones there. So it goes somewhere about there probably. Okay, and then let's add the sky. So my subjects look great. The sky and the way I'm gonna make the reflection on the sand is gonna warm up the rest of this file. So I'm gonna add a texture and I'm gonna go back to the skies category again. And I'm gonna choose a nice warm sky. So this was sky, so I'm gonna choose skies number 3. And instead of the mode being subtle, I want to replace it. So we're going to replace the sky. Okay. I'm going to go grab that masking bug and pop that on there. We're going to change it from linear top again to linear bottom so that we can see the sky only on the top. And then I'm going to adjust it so that it's at my horizon. So we got to go up a little bit. And then I'm going to soften that gradient. So one other trick on this is you can change the scale of the clouds. And there's a couple fun things on this. One, I want to change it on this image because I'd like to make these clouds a little bit bigger. They look kind of small behind my subject and I want to stretch it out a little bit. The scale button can also be great if you're using the same sky on multiple images within a session where you want the clouds. I mean, if you think of normal clouds, they move. So they're going to be a little bit bigger. They're going to move off to the right a little bit to the left. You can use the same sky, but adjust that scaling a little bit to make it a little bit different for the next photograph so that it is more of a believable sky. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to grab my masking brush, and I'm going to do this really loose, you guys, so bear with me a little bit, but I'm going to mask that off of my subject's faces. Okay. And I realize this is not going to be perfect, but I don't want to spend a long time on this for the webinar. But if you zoom this in and be very, very careful, you can mask them out pretty good so that none of the sky is showing on your subjects. I would probably also mask a little bit in these areas so it's staying more up in the horizon. Okay. And make sure that you're painting out on that. Okay, bear with me a little bit here. And then I'm going to take that texture or that sky and pull it back quite a bit. So it's a little heavy, so that's pretty unbelievable for me. So I'm going to pull it back probably about a 50-40, somewhere in there. Okay. So since I have a reflection in this, I would also expect that I would have a reflection of the sky. So I'm going to add another texture, and we're going to add that exact same sky. So we're going to go back to skies. And we're going to replace it with a 3. And I'm going to keep this one on subtle instead of actually replacing it. I think that that's going to be a little bit better. And then let's pull the opacity back a little bit. It's a little bit too much saturation. I'm gonna pull that down a little bit. And then I am gonna rotate so that we have now the sky reflecting what we had up top. So change the scale. I'm gonna change the scale so it matches. I'm gonna pull those a little bit bigger. And then I'm gonna grab my masking bug one more time. And I'm gonna make this one so it's just on the sand. So let's pull that gradient out a little bit. And now you can see that it's just underneath their feet. Okay, so let's do a before and after. So there's our before and there's our after.
You know, while you're there, Whitney, we did have a question from Mike about the two people in the back right. How would you get rid of those two people from the photo?
So I would actually do a little cleanup on that. So this is a really good question here, because there's a little bit more than just those people. I'd probably do a little bit of cleanup in the sand as well. The retouch brush is probably the fastest way on these. I would grab the retouch brush. We have it feathered. I'm going to take the opacity down just a little bit, and I would just scoop right over those guys and get them out of there. And then I would probably go around and adjust a little bit in the sand as well. So I'm okay with some of it, but I think some of these spots could probably go away. You can also use the clone stamp if you prefer. The retouch brush actually works great on this because it's all pretty similar here to get these spots out. Okay. And then this is still a little cool for me. I would probably take it into develop and probably warm this up a little bit more. I kind of like the little pinky tones to match the sky a little bit. So back in develop, if you just adjust that temperature slider, you can get it personal preference. I think I like this a little bit warmer. I can also tell, I mean, I was quickly on the masking. You can go in and paint out and clean up that masking a little bit as well so that it's not as obvious that there's a little bit of halo around Lily's face there.
And then there were a few questions on saving the photo. I don't know if you're ready to do an export or a save just yet. But if you are, there were a few people asking questions about when you're saving, how do I save this photo? Where does that saved photo go? Walk me through this process.
I'm gonna up the contrast a little bit. Every time I edit this photo, I make a couple more changes. Okay, so once I have this done, same thing as last time, just real quick, I would make sure I save a preset on this as well so that I can use it again. I want to be able to use the same sky, the same look for other images that I took in the same location. So make sure that you save that preset out. And then from there, I do two things. So we can talk a little bit about finals. Once I have my job completely edited and have all the files done to what I want or have them completed the way I want, I'm going to export two versions of all of the photos out. So I export a smaller, lower res file that I use for, say, Facebook posts, social media. I do Animoto slideshows for my clients. So if I want to make their slideshow, I'm going to come into export and I'm going to export out a 1500 pixel on the long side size alongside with a JPEG with an sRGB for web. So I would export all of them in that small, low res file. Then I would turn off photo size and I would go ahead and export all of the files out so that I have everything with the baked in settings. And this is just a backup for me. As a non-destructive workflow, you can definitely go back in and make changes, especially when your client orders. You can go in and make the changes that you need or crop it the way that you need to. But I like to be complete with my job and have my baked in settings on a full res file that I can use to place their order if needed. If I need to go back and make the changes, then I'll re-export the file out after I make those changes.
Great, awesome. And while you're there, before you jump on, there was a question just about the edges around Lily's face there. What kind of tools would you use if you did want to get real intricate on that mask and clean it up? I know I myself would use the chisel tool among other things. Would the perfect brush be something to use here?
You can use a perfect brush. If I would have zoomed in this a little bit better and made a little smaller brush, I would have been able to go through this a little bit better as well. I was just trying to do it quick for tutorial purposes. But you definitely can try the perfect brush and kind of sneak that in there. She's got a nice defined line around there, so that actually would work rather well. Or again, I can just use my brush a little smaller and just take the time to go a little bit slower and go through that. So I would always zoom to 100%. I was cheating so that you guys could see it quickly, but I would zoom to 100% when you do that so you can see exactly what you're doing.
Awesome.
Okay. Okay, so let's keep going. So we're gonna head back into here. I think I might be going kind of quick. Okay, one of the things that I want to talk about is saving out the presets. So you can see all of the beach presets over here that I've saved and the skies that are in them. They're all saved as a horizontal. So one of the things that I want to show you is if you do save a file with a horizontal gradient mask, you can still use that preset, but you're going to need to take it back in and rotate that sky. So say we have this photo, we want to go ahead and grab the Manzanita, which was the file or the preset that I just made, and you can see that the sky appears crooked. So in the textures, I'm going to take the rotate, and I'm just going to, oh, I'm on the wrong one. Let's get down. That one's on the sand one. So let's take that one off actually. So make sure that you select the filter, grab your little rotate, and go ahead and rotate that sky exactly how you want it. Change the scaling if you need to. And then make sure that you adjust that mask. So that mask may not be in the perfect place as you move it. So I'm going to take that and put that masking bug exactly where I need it. So now I've added a quick preset. Let's do this. I'm going to warm this up a little bit too. So I'm going to warm this one up a little bit blue, and now I've got a finished image again that is very similar to the other one. Okay, so I kind of want to do a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, if that's okay. I hope that wasn't too fast on the sky replacements. I know that you can spend a lot of time working on photos. Again, I shoot kids and families, so I try to be quicker. I try to get through the edits without spending an hour editing a photo. I know with landscape photographers, you have maybe more time that you can really tweak things. I try to keep things simple. Obviously, you want the sky to be believable. But try not to make too many changes or spend too much time on each of the images. You know, save those presets, reuse them if you can, make the small changes that they need. Still doing okay? Looks like you're answering questions.
Yeah, no, everything is going good.
If you guys have any questions, please pop up. I would love to help on some back stuff.
Yeah, use the questions pane on the right side there on the control panel. If you have anything, just send it over to me. I can pass it right on up to Whitney and we can answer anything you have.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about behind the scenes stuff if I can, and then we can play with a couple more images. So shooting at the beach, it's kind of hard sometimes to think about different things that you can do while you're there. I mean, you think you're going to the beach, they're all water photos. The house that we stayed at, like I said, had this beautiful seagrass that led right to the beach. So I was able to use quite a bit of, utilize this so that we had different looks just by having the two separate locations. I also used the driftwood that I found on the beach. And then another thing to keep in mind is to change your angles, to make sure that you don't forget the little details. I had let's go back to browse here where I shot the hands with the sand. I mean, I think about what the beach represents, especially when you have little kids. They love the water. They love playing in the sand. I mean, sand is really everywhere. So I try to embrace that and make sure that I capture exactly how the beach feels. So get those details, get those, you know, fingers and toes in the sand, get some black and white shots. You know, here we have glasses. We used a few props when I was shooting. Make sure that you step back and get those far away shots, because those are the ones that the clients are going to want to buy and make a large canvas that they're going to hang on their wall. But don't forget to get those tight details as well, so that you can create an album or a collage or whatever you decide to do with end result of those. Kids love to be crazy, so this was a favorite shot that we did. getting the kids to cooperate and pose can sometimes be challenging. Letting the kids open up and say, we're going to do a crazy fun shot. This often can be the ones that the parents like the most because it's really who their children are. But it also helps break the ice a little bit with the kids that you're photographing as well. You say, hey, let's get that, great shot that we want, and then let's get our crazy shot. And they get very excited that they get to be silly and do something fun.
There's a couple questions here, Whitney, about retouching on kids' faces. I mean, not that anything really jumps out at me from these images, but I think people are wondering is when's too much? What's a good amount of retouching for? Okay, this is
you like this image.
Great one. Yeah, I think this is really what people are kind of asking, is if there's a kid with a bruise or something on his face that shouldn't be there. What's a good amount of retouching? What's too far? I'll let you take it away from there.
Okay, so it's kind of funny. So this is a client I've been shooting since he was a baby. My clients are so used to me. He got this big raspberry here on his chin the day before the session. So luckily they know me well enough to know that's not a reason to cancel. I mean, if I had kids or I had clients cancel for bruises and bumps and scratches, I would never have a session ever. So kids always have something. There's Band-Aids, there's bruises, there's scratches. I am very simple in my retouching with children. I know if you shoot a weddings or you shoot high school seniors, you can do a little extra retouching. It's okay. I think that that's accepted. It's more fashion. But with little kids, you really want to keep it real. You want to keep them who they are. But if they have a giant raspberry on their face, I would definitely want to retouch this out. Close up, you can see he's got some nice sand as well. But the thing that I would do two things on this. You can add the skin retouching filter, and I'm going to bump that all the way up. I'm going to grab the skin dropper, and I'm going to grab his skin so I know what skin color he is, and I'm going to put that range all the way up so we make sure that we get all of his skin. I'm going to invert the mask, and I'm going to paint in just in the areas on his skin where I want the retouching. And I'm just going to do a little bit. Actually, I'm painting out. So we're going to paint in, sorry. We're going to paint in to smooth out his skin. Okay. I'm going to show you a little before and after. You can see this is very, very, very subtle. I can turn the blemishes up a little bit and a little bit up on the smoothing, but I wouldn't go too much. I don't want my kids to look like plastic. So now you can see that it's softened up underneath his eyes. It's very subtle. Once I have the skin retouching on there, I'm going to grab either the clone stamp or the retouch brush. We're going to make that as small as we possibly can. I'm going to paint over this a couple of times. So I'm going to turn my opacity down a little bit. I'm going to turn my feather up. If you have your feather all the way down, I'm going to actually just show you guys. It's going to give it a nice hard edge. So if we turn that up and brush, we should get a nice soft edge. So I'm just going to brush over this a couple of times, and you can see his little raspberry is disappearing. And then I'm going to dust off a little bit of this sand, and you can see the retouch brush is doing a pretty good job here, actually. Okay, let's actually undo that last one. And then the other thing that I see on this is he's got a little bit underneath his eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and use that retouch brush one more time and just kind of soften that little dark spot under his eyes a little bit. Okay, so here is a before and after with the retouching. So still pretty subtle, but you can see that he's got smoother skin now. We've got no raspberries. The next thing I would probably do is brighten up his eyes a little bit, so I can give you guys a little tip on that. I'm going to do that in local adjustments. I'm going to use the lighten, and I'm going to mask in, so we're at paint in, just on the whites of his eyes here a little bit, so we can brighten up the eyes a little bit. Take that one out. And I wouldn't go too heavy on this either. I would just do it really slight. You can change the opacity a little bit if you want as well. And then I would also add a little bit of detail, and I would do the same thing, black mask, and I would just mask in a little detail and sharpen up those eyes a little bit.
Nice, okay. That looks great. I know that this one, for me, the eyes specifically have been a troublesome spot when you're shooting in the high light environments. like the coast like that.
Yeah, that can be kind of tricky too. If anybody watched the trailer that I had for this, there was a little video of me, I don't know if the trailer's still on Facebook, if they can go there, of actually lighting this shot. And the only thing that I took when I go to the beach is a light disc. So I did have an assistant. I had somebody holding the light disc most of the time. In this particular shot, you can see that he's got a little bit of light in his eyes. I have a light disc kind of sitting on my knees. I'm just holding it while I'm shooting so that I can pop a little bit of light in his eyes. The sun is behind him. So that is something that is super important if you're shooting on the beach. Keep the sun behind your subject. If you have them facing the sun, they can't see. They're going to be squinting, and it's already rough enough to see on the beach, but you want to definitely make sure that you keep the sun behind them, which puts you shooting into the sun. And then if you have a light disc, pop a light disc in. In Oregon, it's super windy. It was a little tricky with the light disc. We didn't use it all the time. We were doing our best to not blow over when we were holding it. But if you're trying to take a bunch of lighting gear, I wouldn't suggest it. I would try to keep it as simple as you can, especially if you're photographing kids. They're not going to sit still. You're going to be running after them, chasing around the beach. You want to be flexible. You want to be able to move quickly and be able to capture what you need. So just a little bit of light in the face is great. This still has a nice soft look. I could still make a few adjustments to this as well. I would probably lighten it up a little bit. Sorry, back and develop. On the exposure, I would probably lighten this up just a little bit as well to make it pop a little bit. Okay. So again, there's your before and there's your after. And it's a little heavy on the eyes. If you wanted to, back in local adjustments, you can just pull that opacity back on each of them just a little bit so it's not too heavy. I try to keep things as natural as possible. Again, we're shooting kids. We're not doing high fashion here. So I would try to keep it as real as you possibly can. Okay.
So there is a question, and I think this is probably a great segue for you, Whitney. Do you ever use starting point presets? How do you build your collection of presets? You know, where do you start basically when you have an image like this, a set of images of the same scene with, you know, the same family? What do you do to start?
Okay, well, so I pretty much worked on this image and already made some changes to this. I would save a preset, and kind of like we talked about earlier, I save presets by either theme or session. If you're working on a session and you want to create a couple looks for that session and you get the look you want from your favorite photo, and then you save a couple presets that you're going to use. These are the 12 presets that I've created for my beach sessions. So these are the ones that I would typically use. So I would go through these and use them for all of the sessions that I shot while I was at the beach. And I would make little tweaks to them. So Mo makes a very good point that presets are starting points. So you've already seen me have to take one of these for a vertical shot. So you'll see this one has a vertical shot, and you're gonna have to go in and change it. It has a mask on it, it's gonna need adjustments. You may also have presets that they're not quite right. The exposure needs changed a little bit, or you wanna take the temperature down a little bit, or say you like the ones with the skies, but you wanna remove the sky. So you're gonna wanna grab those presets and pull them into effects and make the little changes that you want. If you wanna save an additional preset, you can save a double one. Like, so say this is seagrass and it's for a horizontal image. If I wanted to change this for a vertical, I could resave it and save it as seagrass/V for vertical so that I know that I can use it for my vertical images. Presets are fantastic, and they are the way that I can speed up my post-production and make things a lot faster, especially when I'm keeping it simple. Something that we've talked about, Mo, in the past is keeping things simple throughout the same session. So if you have your 3 or 4 presets that you're using, let's actually go back into browse. You can copy and paste those. So let's add one here. So I'm going to open this image and I'm going to add beach bum. So once I have the preset added to this, all of the images that are in that same series that I'm giving to the client, I would go ahead and copy those settings and I would paste it to all the other images in that. And I want to paste both develop and the effects settings. And this would be the same. You could add the preset to all of them, but if I make any adjustments, I'm going to paste them across. One suggestion and tip that I will always give people is to keep things as consistent as possible and only use a small handful of presets or looks in one individual session. So maybe the difference between seniors and kids. If you have a high school senior and you're doing funky fashion and you're all over the place and you're shooting in this location and that location and you're using a whole bunch of different looks, that's something you can get away with. With what you're seeing here, you're seeing one location here in the seagrass, and then we're heading to the beach and you're going to see the beach area. So with those two locations, I want to use very similar looks or it's not going to make any sense. If I grab this file and I, put a crazy sky on it and then I do the one next to it and I add a nice soft look to it, it's not going to give you a nice consistent look for the client. They're not going to understand if you shot in the same spot, how come one looks this way and one looks that way. So I would keep them as consistent as you can and roll with the look that you're inspired by or the look that you really enjoy.
Awesome.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about posing. We talked about shooting into the sun, so making sure that the sun is behind your subject. Wind can be a fun one on the beach, especially if you have girls. On the boys, it was a little bit easier. I didn't have to worry quite as much, but this can get tricky. You do have to work with the wind a little bit. We had a couple of times where we were being a wind barrier with the light disc trying to block the wind so that it wouldn't blow the hair. But most of the time I just try to roll with it. Hopefully you can get the sun behind and the wind still going in the right direction, but that can get tricky as well. Okay, so if I have any other questions, I would love to answer some more. It looks like you're handling most of them over there.
There is a question actually. There's two questions I have for you. The first one on a Wacom tablet. Do you use one? I think I know the answer to that, but a few customers are asking if you use a Wacom tablet.
Nope.
So that's a no on that one.
I tried once, I will admit it. My husband said I had to use it, and that's what all of the best retouchers did, and I think I used it for about an hour before it ended out the window. So that's personal choice. Yeah. I think some people that use it say you have to stick with it, and once you've transferred over, you love it. Not there for me. So.
I like it myself. So
Same.
Second question would be, outside printing sources. I know a couple customers noticed that you shot sRGB. I told them that was a requirement of your printing.
So I don't shoot sRGB. I photograph in Adobe RGB.
Adobe RGB.
sRGB color space is going to be for web. So if I'm exporting files out, I'm changing them to sRGB for the web. So that's the best color space if you're going to be posting somewhere. My lab of choice is White House Custom Color. They're a pro lab. Their printers take Adobe RGB. So that's what I send to them. They do all of my small prints, all of my large prints, a beautiful job. So you have to use the color space for the printer that you're using. So if you are printing your own, a lot of in-home printers are going to be sRGB. Make sure that you are exporting those files out properly for what your export is or your output is.
Awesome. Looks like that helped out a lot. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any other new questions, so just to remind everyone, we're getting close to the end of the webinar. We'll take this last 10 minutes or so here. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in there to that questions box. I can have Whitney answer them here for you guys real fast.
Yeah, if there's another area you want me to go over again, I'd be happy to do that, but that's pretty much what I had together for you guys, but I'd be happy to do another image if they want.
Yeah, why don't you take us through that image there of the dog on the side. I know that you put a couple on the Facebook that were awesome with the kid and his dog together. Just how did you whittle down, I guess, those
this whole series was great, actually. So this was probably a good one anyways, just for about getting details. So they brought their dog to the session. You try shooting a young child and a dog. That is probably the hardest thing you could ever shoot. And I will give you a little backstory. That was the first thing I ever did photograph. So when I was 17 years old, I did an internship from the photographer that shot my senior photos. And he brought a toddler and a dog and said, if you survive this, you're going to make it. So somehow I still shoot kids. So shooting a kid and a dog on the beach is crazy. They're running two different directions all over the place, but it was a blast. I chased after them. I chased after them. I, tried to get the details, and that's kind of what you can see here. I mean, they were playing, they were, being crazy. And then from this, I'm able to pull a nice little collage out of it. I actually love this shot. This is probably far from perfect, but to me, it's the moment of exactly what was happening. So the little boy Tristan was just attacking his dog over and over again. And so I love getting these little details. I managed to get the dog by himself as well. But these are the ones that will get tied into a collage or a series that the client will end up with in the end. Most likely what I'll end up doing for these guys is probably a little collage of the two of them playing, and they're going to be hanging it in the kids' playroom. So you had another question, I think, on there as well.
Would this be something you use compare mode for?
So I use compare mode sometimes. Typically, I'll use compare mode when I am narrowing down to the finals. So at the very beginning, we talked about starring through and pulling out all my favorites. Even when I do that, I don't have 50. I'm still going to probably have 100 or 120, or I mean, there's still going to be too many to give my client. I will pull them into compare mode like you see here, and I will go through them and pick my favorites. I can remove the ones that I do not want, and I'll move them around until I get my finals that I want to keep. And you can see them down here as well. So I can select ones that I want to add in. I can change my star system here too, but I would use compare mode. This was probably my favorite new feature, actually, to be able to narrow those down to those finals. If you have family and you're looking at them, you can pull them all close. So you can make sure that you pull the sharpest or the one that has all of the eyes open. You can scan through it and be able to pull your favorite out of that as well.
Awesome. And then also there's a question here from Steven about explain why you shoot with the sun at the client's back. It seems counterintuitive. I know you covered that a little earlier. If you could just go over that a little bit again.
It is kind of funny, right? But if you think about it, can you stare at the sun? I mean, if you are the subject and you're looking into the sun, I guarantee you're squinting, which does not make for great portraits. So you need to have yourself shooting into the sun. You can have a lens hood on your camera if you want. I'm usually pretty careful about getting lens flare unless I want it, which can also be great. But if the sun is up high in the sky, you're probably going to be okay. But you want your subject to be able to open their eyes. So that's number one. And then number two, the sun is going to light them up from behind. So you're going to have a nice glow behind them. And then you're going to pop in a little bit of light from the front. So all of these are going to have the sun behind. Everything that you see is the subjects, the sun is behind them. So the sun is behind and we're popping light in from the front. So you get that nice light that you need. If you tried to, like I said, try to put your subject facing the sun, you're going to get squinted eyes. They're not going to be able to open them. You're going to need to put on, sunglasses. If you want to do something like that, you can. But you definitely want to shoot into the sun. The other thing that I try to avoid is high noon if possible. So when I did this shoot, I booked a couple of sessions in the morning. I broke for lunch and took a break. Part of that was I wanted to eat, but also because that's where the sun is the worst. And then we went back out a little later in the afternoon. So once the sun has dropped a little bit, you're going to get a little bit better light as well. But when it is straight up in the sky, you're going to get crazy shadows everywhere. And it's a lot harder to get that sun behind them. We should talk a little bit about black and white. Do you have something?
Yeah, there actually was a question on black and white earlier that I helped answer, but you could probably give some more insight to this. If you're going to take a color image and go into black and the white, do you do anything different with the clouds when you're adding them to the image?
Not necessarily. It might change a little bit because you have to think if you're doing black and white, you're not going to get these pretty colors. You're just going to get the shapes. So if you're doing black and white with clouds, you're going to want to make sure that you still get the shapes that you want within it. Or, I mean, the haze, like on this, the haze doesn't actually bother me that this is black and white. So I think that's kind of dependent upon what you prefer as well. I have a couple black and whites. I do typically give my clients a little bit of a mix of both black and white and color. I'm a big fan of black and white, even though I was at the beach and the beach is beautiful in blue colors. I think that the emotion and there's different things that can happen when you have that black and white little sweet moment, as well as some of the details. You saw the hands, the feet I've done. I'll make those kind of things black and white. So they're a little bit more storytelling for me. I've been doing this long enough. I mean, I used to work in the darkroom with black and white photos, so I still have a soft spot for black and white images. I do warm mine up a little bit. Typically, I'll add a little bit of warmth in them or a little matte look to them as well. But again, keeping those consistent looks. This is Sand Dollar, actually. The barefoot's going to be a little bit more blue. I think I was thinking more on the beach, a little bit more blue tones to it as well. But you can see it gives it a nice little softness there.
You know, that's a good segue also. There was a question on the difference between copying and pasting the preset versus syncing the settings like you showed everyone earlier.
Okay, that's actually a good one. So there's, like anything, right? Like cooking, there's 1,000 different ways that you can do stuff, and it kind of depends on what you prefer to do as well as what you've done to that photo. So let me scroll down here a second. So if I add a preset to this one, so I'm just going to grab a black and white preset, you can copy those settings and paste them if you want. So you can right click and you can copy, and then you can go to our next one or grouping of them and paste them. Okay, and then you can choose what you're pasting. So say on this first image, I had done develop and effects settings, but I only wanted to paste the effects settings. You can control this when you're copy and pasting. So I'm going to go ahead and paste everything that's there. If you sync your settings, you're syncing the settings exactly how they are. There's not a choice. So it's going to match my super selected file. Is going to sync across everything that you see here. Okay. I typically will copy and paste. If I'm doing a whole series, I will sync. If you've added a preset, you can add a preset to a bunch of them. But if you've went in and made any changes to that preset, you may want to copy and paste from the image and sync across, depending on how you did it. So here I just added the preset all the way through. But if I had gone in, say to develop, this one's a little dark. So I'm going to go ahead and say, change the exposure a little bit in develop. So I'm going to make a little change here. I'm going to head back to browse. This is not the best choice here, but now there's an exposure change. So in that same series, I want them all to match. So in this circumstance, I would go ahead and sync those settings. So now the ones that I added the preset will all match. I will do the sync settings if I go in and make changes like I just did. If I go into develop and make a little exposure setting to 1, I need to make sure that that whole series matches. So I would go ahead and quickly sync through. I do probably 90% of my finishing my images directly in browse with what you see here. I go through, I grab my presets, I have my section of presets that I'm going to use, especially if I've already went in, chosen my couple favorites, did a little work on them. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go ahead and start syncing them and copying them and pasting them and keeping the series the same, other than maybe making one black and white and then grabbing the rest of them and making them a color image. But I can quickly go through and edit my whole client's job right here in browse. Then if I need to make a change, I can take the one image that I want, go ahead and make the change, and then go back and sync it across the rest of them, rather than having to open all of these up one at a time. So all the little tips that you can take to try to make that workflow a little bit faster is impactful in the end. So instead of spending 3 to 4 hours in post-production, I'm spending 30 minutes in post-production, and I'm getting a great set of images to be able to show my client.
And can you copy paste or sync the settings while you're in the compare view mode? I actually don't know that one myself.
You can do it down here in the film strip. So you have your pop-up here. So you just need to right click and you can copy and paste and sync your settings right here.
And I'll reply.
Okay, so you can't do, there's not a contextual menu up in your actual compare mode preview, but you can do it down in your film strip.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that's the same thing with your rating. You can actually rate in compare mode. You'll see it change here. Or you can also click on the 5-star down in your film strip. Okay.
Awesome. So it looks like we have just about 2 more questions here. The first one from Lane. He just wants you to cover again the save process through export. If you could just, show off some of those options there about photo size, changing the color space if you need to for web or whatnot.
I can do that. Okay, so here's your export dialog pop-up. It's going to come up with the last thing that you used. The main things that I'm going to use in here is photo size. You also have watermark if you want to add any watermarks to your files, especially if you're posting on social media, you have that option as well. Photo size I will use if I am making my images a different size than the originals, obviously. So if I'm going to post on the web, I only want 1500 pixels. I don't want to post ginormous photos on the web. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to resize it to the size that I need, either by long edge, short edge, or if you have to have an exact, you can do that as well. Typically, I will do the long edge and I will change it to 1500 pixels. So this is for my low res files that I'm going to post on the web or use for a slideshow for the client. I'm going to leave this on the general ON1 resize. The file type you can change to JPEG, Photoshop, TIFF, or PNG. I'm just going to make it a JPEG. And then you can adjust the color space depending on what you need for your output. Okay, so on the web files, I'm going to export sRGBs, and then I'm going to put them in the folder that I need them to go in. Okay, if I am exporting the full res, I'm going to keep photo size off because I want the full file, and I'm going to keep a JPEG, but I'm going to adjust my color space to Adobe RGB, and I'm going to export out I'm going to call them my originals with settings. So with my settings baked in, I'm going to export that out. You can also rename here if you want, if you need to rename your files. I typically will rename mine back in Browse. I will do a batch rename, and I won't do this until I've completely edited my entire job. So once I have it down to my 50 or 80 files that I'm going to show my client, I will grab all of them and I will change the name to their last name. And then I will add one more and I will change it to a serial number, and I will change it, start it at 001. And I'll rename all of my files to the client's last name 001 all the way through, which makes it a little bit easier than this crazy number that you're seeing over here. Easier when you're making an order, when your client's telling you, I want to order number 10, they'd rather do that than I want, 5721. So I will do that at the very, very end.
All right, looks like we have one more question, and this has actually been asked quite a few times, is do you do most of your processing in ON1? I saw Lightroom pop up when you were going through and was wondering if you used Lightroom for anything or just ON1.
Not anymore. So once the new compare mode came in and this non-destructive workflow, I actually do not use anything else. I will use Photoshop. I shouldn't lie, hold on. I do use Photoshop from time to time. But as far as all of my processing on all of my images, I do everything strictly in ON1. So I have my presets, I have my look that defines kind of who I am and what my studio represents. I can quickly do it now. I mean, I mentioned earlier, I used to spend 3 hours editing files. I would open them one at a time. I would make the look that I needed. Now I just breeze through this stuff. I add my looks, I get it done, I export them out, and I'm complete. So nope, not anymore.
Awesome. Well, so that's great to hear.
That's been a new thing since 2017 has came out. So I was pretty stoked by the newest version, both with my workflow changing and making those adjustments that I needed. I encourage you guys, if you need workflow, help to take the time to work through the kinks and find the areas that you're lacking and make them better. I mean, I mentioned that I select my favorites when I edit. That was a pretty big breaking point for me. I used to go through and try to pick out all the bad ones. And, for some reason that took me 10 times longer or more. Now that I just select my favorites, I'm done in no time. So find the areas that you need maybe a little bit of tweak to and figure out a way to make them better, or learn or get some tips that can help make it a little bit faster. You need to be back behind those cameras, not spending too much time in front of the computer doing all of your editing.
Awesome. Yeah.